Okay, we're live, everybody. Hello to everyone. Hello, Alexander. Hello, Gonzalo. I'm gonna rush through the intro because I'm a little pressed for time. So we have about an hour and a half. I'm going to be posting questions on the screen, and Alexander and Gonzalo, hopefully they can try to weave in all the questions that you have in the chat as they're discussing various news topics. I put as some topics that we can start with Kaliningrad, the return to coal. Winter is coming, and it looks like Russia's in a favorable position. Hello to everybody on Odyssey, on Rumble, on YouTube, and our awesome locals community, the Duran.locals.com. Hello to our awesome moderators as well. Thank you, everybody who is helping us out to moderate this channel. Gentlemen, Gonzalo, Alexander, I hope both of you are well. I want to really get into the news because we have about an hour and a half, and I don't want to take up any more time. Let's pass it off to our guest, Gonzalo. What do you want to start up with in this program?
Gonzalo?
We lost Gonzalo.
We've lost Gonzalo. We'll get him back. Well, Gonzalo has been doing lots of fantastic work about the progress of the war. And I think I'm going to just start briefly with that. I mean, it's becoming increasingly clear that things are going badly wrong for Ukraine and for the West in the war. And I was just reading a comment by the Russian Defense Ministry that they're having a wonderful time destroying US M777 howitzers as they arrive in Ukraine. And they claim that they've just destroyed another 15 before they even fired a shot. So things are going very badly wrong in the war. You know, if you're a Western person, there's now talk about the war going on for a very long time. And that's, I think, meant to be reassuring because it's telling people, well, you know, the Russians aren't going to win. They're going to be caught in a long, grinding war of attrition, except it's causing concern. And this morning, I was reading an article in the British Guardian, the newspaper, and it's by a journalist called Gabby Hinscliffe, who is as about conventional as you get. She's not somebody who deviates in any way from, you know, the sort of conventional wisdom about things. And she says, look, if we are going to be in a long war, a war of attrition, then the British people need to be told about this, because we are now suffering increasingly severe economic losses. And our living standards are plunging. We're facing a cold winter. If this is going to go on for years, it's debatable whether we can take it. So, in fact, I don't believe it's going to go on for years. I don't know how many more months it's going to go on for. But what I do know is that this talk, if it's intended to keep people, you know, battling on, supporting Ukraine, it's actually having the opposite effect. It's making people say, my God, are we in this for such a long time? You know, we've got to find a way out. And you're already seeing this in Britain too.
Gonzalo, are you?
Hey, guys.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I am. Sorry about that.
You're all good.
As soon as you went live, it started roboting and it froze up and I had to refresh. Sorry about that. And by the way, to the super chat who asked, you know, Network is a horrible movie because it's overacted, overwritten. It doesn't make psychological sense. And it's not as insightful as everybody thinks it is.
I seem to remember there was people screaming out of windows, unless I'm getting the film mixed up. That's the only memory I have of it. I probably saw it at about the time. If that's the one I think it is, Network. Gonzalo? I think we've lost him again. Anyway, we've had a question, and it's an interesting question about the Lithuanians. And this is all about Kaliningrad. And the point that the person is making, Commander Crossfire, in fact, is that the Ukrainians need to remember, Lithuanians need to remember that if they start blockading Kaliningrad, then the Finns got together with the Germans and did the same thing with Leningrad during the Second World War. And, of course, the Finns ended up paying a heavy price when they were on the defeated side in that war. And the Russians have never forgotten it. I don't think we're quite as bad a situation in Kaliningrad yet, because, of course, this blockade is a very partial blockade. You can still send things by sea. I think the Russians will have no difficulty sending things by sea. But what is really shocking about this affair, about the Kaliningrad affair, is not just that they are trying to blockade Kaliningrad. It is the way in which sanctions is being used to deny international law. So remember, sanctions has no actual legal basis. There is no provision that says that countries can impose sanctions. There's no provision, by the way, in the European Union treaties, which I've read, which says that the European Union is entitled to propose sanctions. But if you propose sanctions, you can tear up contracts, which of course is what the European Union has been doing. And of course, it shows that you can tear up treaties as well. You can disregard treaties, formal treaties, which you signed and ratified in the past, which mean that you have to guarantee transit by rail to Kaliningrad across the Baltic states. But sanctions supposedly allows you to do anything. It is, in other words, an instrument for legal chaos, because from this point on, any treaty, any contract signed with a Western company or agreed with a Western state can be torn up at any time if Washington and Brussels decide to impose sanctions, which means that you can cancel it.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. The technical difficulties. I hope that this is more stable. Do you guys hear me properly?
Yeah, we hear you clearly.
You're all good.
So what to go back to what Alexander was saying previously, sorry to go back, but I really want to emphasize a couple of points on the M777 howitzers. Something interesting has popped up that the Deputy Minister of Defense, I believe, whose name I don't know off the top of my head, but the Ukrainian one, of course, he was criticizing the M777s. He was saying that the problem that they were having with them is that after the first rounds, the first usage, it had to receive very serious maintenance, and they just didn't have the men or the spare parts to be able to service them. And this goes to a point that I've emphasized for a number of months now, that Western weaponry is not robust enough for a war like this, a long grinding out war of attrition. And I think that this might play into the issue of NATO being very, very leery of actually going head to head with the Russians, because not only are they realizing that they don't have the ammunition for a long war, I mean, a war of more than just a few months, not only do they not have the industrial base to be able to manufacture the weapons necessary for such a long slog, but the weapons that they do have are so fragile that they might, break at the first opportunity, as is happening here from the testimony of this Deputy Ministry of Defense. So that doesn't augur well. Now, to go to Kaliningrad issue, Alex and I were talking about it, prior to the show, and my question is, what did Lithuania gain from doing this? Absolutely nothing, as far as I can tell. I mean, quite apart from the legality or illegality of the actions, what benefit? I mean, you always make a move for your benefit, for a specific benefit, either short-term, medium, or long-term. You don't make a move as antagonistic as this for no reason whatsoever. And so this, to me, indicates that we have a serious problem in the West, in Western leadership, that it's bifurcated. There is one group that wants to wind this down. Draghi, Schultz, and Macron, they went to Kiev and they told Zelensky to start negotiating. And then Boris Johnson flies in and says, never negotiate, fight to the last Ukrainian. And so it seems to me that there's this bifurcation of aims. One hand, you have people like the Pentagon, people like the European EU powers who want to wind this down, realize that defeat is inevitable, and it's better to start negotiating now, which is, in a negotiation when you're losing, you always want to start negotiating as soon as possible, because every day that passes, your negotiating position becomes weaker, which is what's happening with the Zelensky regime. And so There's one side that wants to negotiate, and it's clear that there is another side that wants to escalate. I think that Lithuania, the Lithuanian move, completely idiotic. And by the way, the Lithuanians cowardly, who are now pointing at the EU and saying, they told me to do it. I didn't have anything to do with this, which is just cowardly. I mean, it's this, children schoolyard thing. But anyway, that faction that goaded Lithuania into this stupid move clearly is the faction that wants to escalate. So we're going to have to see which faction wins out in this battle, which is internal. That is my thinking. What do you guys think?
I completely agree. It's a seesaw. So you see some people, and the Italians are very much at the forefront. The French will be soon also after these elections, which we've just had in France. And when the German government collapses, and I gather its poll rating is now 30%, it's falling fast. When the German government collapses in probably the autumn, we'll start to see change there too. So they want a ceasefire. They want peace. Now, they haven't yet understood what that means. They don't understand that maybe the Russians are not going to accept any kind of peace terms on the kind of terms that Italy, Germany, France, and those people want. But anyway, at the moment, they want an end to this. The hardliners, Poland, Lithuania, the hardliners in Washington, the hardliners in Britain, are becoming extremely nervous about all of this, and they're escalating. So you see this tug of war going on, and you see signs of this escalation in all kinds of things. You see it in the shelling of Donetsk, which is now getting completely out of control.
Alexander?
Hello? Do you guys hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you, Gonzalo.
And yeah, because on my end, it sort of like froze up, and I don't hear Alexander though.
Yeah, I think Alexander now is gone. Wow.
Okay. Well.
Wow. Okay, you can continue from where he left off.
Yeah. Like Alexander was saying, it's a seesaw. It's clear a fork in the road. And the collective Western leadership is going to have to make up its mind very soon in which direction to go, because as anybody knows, indecision is always the worst outcome. Because when you're indecisive, your opponents don't know where you're going. And so they can misinterpret a move that you make. You yourself might wind up pursuing the wrong policy and expending a lot of resources if you're indecisive and going back and forth. Many times, and I think that most men who are grown-ups can tell you, it's smartest to make a decision, even if it's not the most optimal decision or even the wrong decision. It's better to take the wrong decision than to be indecisive for a prolonged period of time. And that seems to me the problem that the collective West has. I think that the Russians, number one, they have no intention whatsoever of negotiating a solution to this situation. They've made up their minds that they can't negotiate with the West. As they say, the West is agreement incapable. And after Minsk II, the Russians will never believe anything that Europe tells them. Any promise, any assurance, any guarantee, as far as they're concerned, is a lie. And so they will go to the negotiating table. They will talk, sure, because talk means nothing. But they are not going to agree to anything with the West. Do you think I'm wrong, Alex?
No, I think you're spot on.
Yeah,
they have no reason to negotiate.
No,
they're winning. The West has that they can give them. Yeah,
yeah. And the thing is, see, they did this in 2015. They were winning in 2015, and they went to Minsk, signed Minsk II agreement, and now it's coming out that the Poroshenko regime and the Zelensky regime, presumably, but the Poroshenko regime for sure, because Petro Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, said so. They deliberately stretched out the Minsk agreement because they never had any intention of living up to it. They were just doing it in order to buy time so as to arm themselves to the teeth. The Russians, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. They're not going to allow this to happen a second time.
No.
Yeah. Hey, Alexander.
Yeah.
Yes, you guys, there was an internet cut.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Let's shift, since we're talking about what's going on in Ukraine and the situation on the ground. We talked about Kaliningrad. Let's address this question about the oil rig in Crimea. Yeah. What's
stupid?
The murder of Russian civilians there. Any predictions how Russia will respond?
Well,
I
think
Alexander.
Two quick points about this. Firstly, apparently it was an act of petulance after another failed attack on Snake Island. I mean, this is what I'm hearing. I mean, I can't confirm that. But it's another part of the pattern of escalation that we were talking about just now, that, you're trying to find ways to prevent any possibility of negotiations. So you impose blockades on Kaliningrad, you shell Donetsk, you now attack oil facilities in the Black Sea, very, very close to Crimea. Now, Crimea has, I think, been, for the Russians, they've said it's a clear red line. If the Ukrainians attack Crimea, there'll be all hell to pay. And that's when they will go after the command centers. They've come they've edged very, very close to doing that. I think the Russians will keep their ammunition dry for the moment. I don't think they're going to launch these attacks on those command centers in response to this. But what I think it's going to do, and I've been reading more and more comments about this from Russian sources, it's going to make the Russians even more determined to solve what they see as the problem of Odessa. Because what it shows to them is that whilst Odessa remains under Ukrainian control, no Russian ship, no Russian facility in the Black Sea is safe.
The Donetsk and the Donetsk shelling and the attack on these oil rigs and the attempted storming of Snake Island again. I think that the Russians are going to interpret it correctly as the desperate moves of a collapsing army. I do not think that they're going to take this opportunity to escalate because they understand what's going on. Also, there's another political factor that we should mention. Number one, the Ukrainian judiciary confirmed the outlawing of all opposition political parties. That's the great democracy that the West is fighting for. Yeah. And number two, as I understand it, this is late-breaking news that I was not able to confirm specifically, but apparently there seems to have been a purge of government officials. It was not, I don't want to go into, I can't go into the details of it because I don't know at this time, because it was late-breaking just as I was hopping on. But apparently some government officials in Kiev have been arrested, but not major ones. It seems to have been some sort of cabinet group, excuse me, and not officer corps or generals. So it seems to me that the Russians are probably interpreting all of these moves as, the beast is dying and it's thrashing more viciously than ever as it starts its death throes. I think that that's their calculation. It would certainly be mine.
Have you any news at all, Gonzalo, about whether or not it's true that Zelensky made some kind of secret trip to Lysychansk? Because there's been some rumors about this. Has there been anything said about that you know of?
No. I've heard rumors, but anything like for real? No, I have not heard anything like that. What I am hearing is that the Russians are getting ready for a big offensive around the city of Kharkov, where I am. But insofar as like a secret trip, yes, I've heard rumors. I can't give them any credence. No. So and also, quite frankly, this regime will never miss a photo op. So if they went there to have their dear leader show his face on the front, they would have splashed those pictures all over the place, So I'm not so sure that it's credible, to tell you the truth.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead, Alexander.
Go ahead, Alexander.
No, I was thinking also that we might consider that these arrests in Kiev, if they really have happened. I mean, are people talking increasingly about the level of casualties in Ukraine? Is this something that you hear people talk about and discuss in Ukraine? Because for such a long time, we were hearing the Ukrainians talking about the fact that they were getting very few casualties. I can remember a time when they were even saying that they had more tanks than they started the war with because they captured so many from the Russians. And now they say that they've lost half their tanks. They've lost half their armored vehicles. They're almost out of ammunition. And that they're suffering 1,000 casualties a day. So, I mean, is this being talked about in Ukraine now? Are people?
No, it's become like the era of hyper-normalization, like at the end of the Brezhnev era, where everybody knows the truth, but everybody keeps quiet because everybody knows that no benefit will accrue to speaking out. And that's always a dangerous thing because the populace will find at the first chance they get, they'll try to get out from under the yoke of such a regime. Now, insofar as what do you call it? The losses, the losses, people have known about the losses from the very beginning because people talk, and people, because of communications technology, this isn't the Second World War where people would write a letter and it would take weeks to get there. People can, FaceTime instantly. And so because of it, people are more or less aware as to what has been the fate of their children, their fathers, their brothers, their sons. And so I think people are very demoralized, Ukrainians, but I find myself in an area that is ethnically Russian. And I have to say the truth because it is the truth that people are walking with a certain bounce in their step. They're not particularly upset about the situation. And that's the truth. And these are sophisticated people who are educated enough and well off enough to get decent information as to what's going on. And so, people are not particularly unhappy here in the Kharkov region. They know what's going on in Mykolaiv, not Kherson, the other city, Melitopol. Where there are lines of people getting their Russian passports. Okay, they're aware of that, and they're not unhappy about it. I mean, and so look, the fact that the SBU has squads here in Kharkov going and looking for people who are posting on social media pro-Russian broadcasts and information. That tells you all you need to know. If your country is under attack, you don't have a substantial segment of the population cheering on the other side, okay? Unless they are of the other side, and identify with the other side. You see what I'm saying? And so I think that this is a bit rambling what I'm saying, but you're asking my subjective opinion as to what is the mood in this area of the country. And the mood in this area of the country is not pro-Zelensky. Let's put it that way.
I just wanted to say that the Kharkov affair has been deeply humiliating for the media here in Britain because we all remember that great Ukrainian counteroffensive northeast of Kharkov. I mean, it got enormous publicity here in Britain. I can remember people coming up with extraordinary arrows showing how, Ukraine was advancing all the way northeast of Kharkov and it was going to then cut the Russian supply lines. And this would cause the collapse of the Russian war effort in Donbass. And there were headlines in the newspapers, Ukraine wins Battle of Kharkov. I mean, I remember reading these articles. And of course, what has happened is that just a few weeks later, without any explanation, the British have not been provided any explanation at all of why there's been this complete reversal around Kharkov, why there's been this dramatic shift. We now have a situation where it's all gone into total reverse. And Kharkov, apparently, according to the Ukraine and according to the British media, is being threatened once more. So it's a complete change of story, but one which people who follow the media closely, who take their ideas of the war from the media here, must be rather bewildered about.
Yeah, it's how can I put it? At this point, it's comical. And I think also, too, is that people more and more are realizing that the mainstream media is just a pack of lies. I mean, literal lies. You know, I remember too when they were talking about the Kharkov offensive, you know, just a couple of more days and it'll be a clear path all the way to Moscow, and Zelensky will be riding a tank and smashing through into the Kremlin itself to hang Putin from the nearest lamppost, and nonsense to that effect. And you know, what planet are they living on? You know, and it's look, the war is over. I've been saying this for a number of weeks now. This is a police action. It is no longer a war, because in a war, there is the possibility that either side will win. At this point, there is no possibility at all that the Zelensky regime will come out victorious. And the longer they fail to negotiate, the smaller the country that will remain, because all of these territories are going to go to Russia, all of them, no exception. And I think that the Russians have just made up their minds that they're just not going to stop until they have the whole thing sewn up. Yeah. And so the only thing that we can really be paying attention to is what the West does. Yeah. I think that talking about Ukraine is a little bit focusing on minutia, because we know how it ends. Yeah. The only issue becomes, will the West do anything to stop this? I mean, anything realistic to stop it? Or will it be caught in this cycle of indecision between escalation and negotiation, which for the Russians would be good? Or will it go to the side of negotiations definitively, which I personally do not think, because I think that the warmongers in Washington and to a lesser extent in London and Brussels have enough push still to keep this thing going. So, yeah, but the Washington, Brussels, London, that's the only place to be paying attention to now, because here on the ground in Ukraine, it's over. It's over. It's just details as to how this police action will finally unwind. But we are at the end game, and the result is clear.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk
go on.
Yeah,
go on, Alex.
No, I was just saying. Go ahead, Alexander.
No, what I just wanted to say is the interesting thing is I agree with what Gonzalo said. The war, the actual kinetic war, the war that's been fought with battles, we can now see clearly that that's coming to an end. The economic war, the impact of that is only beginning. And that's starting to have a major effect on sentiment in Europe, and I think certainly in Britain it is. And that leads to, questions like the one we just got from a viewer who asks whether the Americans launched it with the intention of crashing the EU and the EU economy. And the answer is, I don't think it was. I think why they launched it because they wanted to achieve regime change in Russia. I think that was the objective. I think they all got together, the people in Washington, the people in Brussels, the people in London, the people in Berlin. They all thought that the Russian economy is one-dimensional. I remember them saying this. It all depended on oil and fuel, and that if we then impose these sanctions, that the Russian economy would collapse like a house of cards. And instead, we are in this terrible war of attrition, economic attrition, which we are losing.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, they always say that every general fights the last war, and it's very true words. Insofar as the economic war is concerned, it's kind of like the same thing, because everybody in the West was thinking of the Russian economy like it was back in 2014. Nobody realized that in these 8 years, the Russians had, in many respects, insofar as their financial structure is concerned, they had seriously changed and improved it and reformed it. Even though 8 years is not a lot of time insofar as a complex, sophisticated financial system is concerned, they really did make some substantial changes. Elvira Nabiullina is the woman to get the credit for this, because she really did the reforms necessary to put the Russian economy on a footing that could withstand such sanctions. And so here we are. The Russians are producing less oil and selling less oil in terms of barrels, and yet making much more money than ever before. And because they don't have the possibility of buying European consumer goods, their foreign reserves are growing astronomically. They have a current account surplus insofar as the government is concerned. They have a budget surplus, not a current account, a budget surplus as far as the government is concerned. And so they're sitting pretty. They've got the cash to spend on more weapons, more men. They can give money to the pensioners. Their great problem now is how to soften the ruble, which is becoming too strong. And the Russian central bank is nervous because a too strong ruble creates the malincentive of too much buying of foreign goods, not enough investment in domestic industry, that sort of thing. And so, but these are problems that you wish that you had. They are the opposite of the problems that the Western economies have. So, yeah, to agree with you completely, this war of attrition has been a disaster, and it's because of this thinking that the Russian economy was still in the shape it was in 2014.
Indeed, sir. Can I just say, if you follow the debates at SPIEF, the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, I don't mean the big ones, the ones, about China and Iran and all those things and all these people coming, the big leaders coming. If you go to the underlying debates, the really interesting debates, actually, which happen, between the sort of lower-ranking officials, one of the very interesting things at SPIEF is that there's been now a big argument between the central bank, the Russian central bank, and the economics ministry. And it's out there in the open. And the central bank says the problem is inflation. We've still got an inflation problem. And the economics ministry says, no, we don't. We've actually got a problem of prices falling. We're in a deflationary cycle. Demand is too low and interest rates are too high. Prices are falling faster than they should. So we're having this argument playing out between various agencies of the Russian government about whether to ease financing further and whether to accelerate, to put the foot on the accelerator in terms of economic growth. And they feel they can do that in an increasingly non-inflationary environment. So it's completely different. I remember back in February, the ruble was going to turn to ruble. It was going to go into free fall. It's now at $54 to the ruble, to 54 rubles to the dollar. It was, went up to 150, but it's now 54. There was going to be hyperinflation. We now have falling. We now have prices actually falling. There was going to be production was going to collapse when, the spare parts ran out. And June was going to be when it was going to happen. Production is rising. I mean, nothing that the West expected has turned out. It's turned out to be the opposite. And it's exactly as you said, Gonzalo. The Russians find themselves in a position which even they didn't fully expect. When they're now having to decide what they do with the results of their own success. It's a complete reversal. It is a completely reversal of the situation. And the fact that the Russians are now looking outward, they feel they can start looking outward. They had Xi Jinping coming to SPIEF. Well, he didn't actually physically go, but he gave an address at the SPIEF conference. You had the president of Egypt there. Lavrov is about to go to Iran and have meetings with the Iranian leadership. There's talk about Russia and Iran connecting their new messaging systems. We have Sberbank, the big Russian savings bank, are now busy apparently developing or working on making the Russian interbank messaging system into a global system, directly competing with with SWIFT. They've been given that job. So you can actually see how the Russians, thinking that they were going to be dealing with a crisis situation, they're actually they now have the room, the space, the maneuver space to look outward. And coming to a point you once made, Gonzalo, in an earlier program, and you've made several times since, one of the consequences of this crisis is it's going to make the Russians, for the first time since the end of the Cold War, realize that they're actually very strong. It's going to make them feel powerful because they've taken on everything that the West could throw at them, military terms, economic terms, and they've come out stronger. Yep. And that is going to have a massive effect going forward, because you're going to have a Russia that is self-confident in a way that it's never been since, well, you have to go back perhaps to the 70s and even the 60s to find a time when the Russians are going to be as self-confident as they're going to turn out very soon to be.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a remarkable turnaround insofar as Russian society. I think, look, the Russian people are in many ways a great people, and they have been, bludgeoned by historical accidents over the last half century. The collapsing Soviet Union, which was a slow motion event, it really started in the 50s. I mean, the whole point of Nikita Khrushchev's kitchen debate was his realization that the Russian economy and the Russian society was so far behind the West. Right? Yeah. And then into the 60s and 70s and 80s, the Brezhnev years, then the 90s, which were traumatic, then the 2000s and the 2010s, where you had, in the late 90s, the crash at the late 90s, and then another crash in 07, and then another crash in 14. Things have been rough, very rocky for the Russians. And all of a sudden they're realizing, hey, we're on top of it. We're winning. And so that creates an enormous amount of self-confidence in all areas. And of course, as anybody knows, when you're on a winning streak, all of a sudden that self-confidence translates itself into every other aspect of your life, be it the life of a person or of a nation. So now going back to the economic thing, I just want to pivot a little bit to look at the anti-Russia in this situation, which is Germany. Germany, which one always thought of as, the people who run their economy like it's a Swiss watch, Well, it's a disaster. Their energy policy is catastrophic, and they are forcibly deindustrializing themselves in a way that is remarkable. They are turning on their coal-burning plants, which isn't an easy thing, instead of rescheduling the close down of their nuclear facilities. I mean, what are these people thinking? Alexander, you have insight into the Germans. What's going on with these Germans?
I think that this hasn't yet hit home. I mean, but it will very soon. And I mean, what the Germans are seeing is that, inflation is taking off, and Germans have sensitivities to inflation, which go way beyond, memories of Weimar, which is what people talk about. As I've said many times, the German economic system really isn't designed to cope with high inflation. And I was just looking at producer prices in Germany over the last few months, the latest set of producer prices, they are awful. I mean, inflation is rising in Germany at catastrophic speeds. And so there is that. There's the first admissions, apparently, on German television that Ukraine is losing the war. And that is quite a big new development. So, and of course, on top of that, you're absolutely right. Germany's going backwards in technological terms. I mean, they're going from gas and oil back to coal. There's the dirty fuel that they were supposed to leave behind. And of course, Ursula von der Leyen's solution is that they should actually press on with windmills, which is, if you think about it, idiotic. A technologically even older type of fuel than coal. So, they haven't gone for water mills yet, but perhaps they will. Now, this is a country that imagines itself to be very technologically advanced, very industrially advanced. German psychology today is very much based around, we're a manufacturing power. If all this goes into reverse, well, the Germans, after all, are the country that came up with the word Angst. We're going to see that in Germany like we've never seen for a very, very long time.
Now, the German phobia of nuclear power just strikes me as absurd. Yeah. Because Germany is the one place where I would feel very confident of having nuclear reactors. Number one, there are no earthquakes. Number two, the Germans are sticklers insofar as safety and that sort of thing, and following safety guidelines and safety protocols. So, I have always heard a rumor, this is a rumor, but I've always heard the rumor that the Green Party was actually paid off by the Russians to encourage the Germans to buy gas and not go into nuclear. That's the rumor I've heard. But them now turning to coal, which goes against everything that they've been espousing of like low carbon footprint, blah, blah, blah. I just don't understand them. The mentality. And by the way, the producer price index for the month of May, year over year, it was 33.1% increase year over year. 33%. That's the producer price index in Germany year over year. That's a catastrophe. And also what's most important is that German manufacturing operates with such thin margins that you're going to see mass bankruptcies over the next 6 to 18 months. This is a catastrophe for precisely those mid-level businesses that you have constantly mentioned, Alexander.
Absolutely. So just imagine you're being told now by your media that Ukraine is losing the war, and you're making all these sacrifices for Ukraine, but they're still losing, and you're seeing your economic system implode. Of course, they're going to have angst in Germany. But to be honest, I don't know how they change this. I don't know how they turn it round. So it's going to be very, very difficult.
Well, there's
Germany
famous saying,
is going to.
I'm sorry. I just want to mention very quickly. There's a very famous saying that it's harder to show a person that they've been fooled than to fool them. I think that the realization that they have been fooled, that the German people have been fooled so catastrophically, will take them a long time to realize. But eventually, they will realize it, and eventually there will be political hell to pay. I mean, I don't know who's going to get the brunt of this responsibility, because Olaf Scholz will be gone. He'll be replaced by somebody else. By the time the majority of the German people realize, what have we done? Because I think that there will be that realization. Do you agree? Or
I completely agree. I mean, the thing to understand about Germany, I mean, one doesn't want to fall into stereotypes, but this thing about Germany being a very orderly, very conformist society, it has a very strong element of truth. There's always been an anarchic strain in Germany, which people don't perhaps know so much about. But fundamentally, the Germans trust their leaders. And when they see that their leaders have completely messed up in this calamitous fashion, then, I mean, that's going to be a profound shock. And what the political effect of that's going to be, I just don't know. I mean, it's difficult to say, given that everything that's been done in Germany for the last 70 years has been designed to buttress trust in the political system because of what went before. So I don't know how it's going to shape out in Germany, but certainly the Germans face an extraordinary, terrible psychological awakening when it happens. Now, just a few points that some people have made about the strong ruble. Somebody made the point that that's helping the Russians reestablish supply chains. There is a debate in Russia between those who are worried about the strength of the ruble and those who are becoming less concerned about it. Now, I am gradually coming round to the view that at this particular moment in time, and I don't say that this is so forever, but for this particular moment in time, a stronger ruble is better for Russia than not, in the sense that it does broadcast to the Russian population that their financial system is sound. And, given recent experiences, I mean, that's not a bad thing, So, then you don't have babushkas rushing off and converting their rubles into dollars and hiding their dollars under their mattress, which is, I mean, it's not a stereotype. It really did happen in Russia in the not so recent past. And somebody made the point that the strong ruble has made it more attractive for others to establish supply chains with Russian businesses. And I think it probably is true. So I think it's good for the economy internally because, as I said, it inspires confidence It means that people are prepared to, that they trust the financial system. They're prepared to keep their money in a Russian bank, not take it out and convert it into dollars and do all kinds of silly things with it. And of course, eventually, they'll start spending those stronger rubles that they have. And at the same time, it does mean that producers, both within Russia and in Iran and Turkey and elsewhere, will be able to say to themselves, well, look, this is a country which we do want to trade with because the currency they're going to pay us in is actually a strong one. And of course, if you're a country like Iran and Turkey, both of which have inflation problems, that becomes attractive. I would say that this is for a certain period of time. And I think eventually, if the Russians do want to promote their own domestic economy, once the sense of crisis ends, once the situation is more normalized, maybe they will be less concerned about having a strong ruble than they do at the moment.
I think that the issue of a strong currency is very dangerous long term, but in the short term, I mean, throughout the next year, the next 12 months from here on out, I think I completely agree that a strong ruble is smarter because it restores faith in the economy of Russia, both internally and externally. Also, a key advantage that they're having, that the Russians are having, is that because they have the sanctions, their citizens are not able to go into euro debt. This normally happens in second and third tier economies, where if their currency gets stronger for whatever reason, the nationals tend to go into foreign debt and spend the money on stupid stuff, vacations in Tahiti and stuff like that, because for their currency, because of their strong currency, for them, a trip to Tahiti, a week-long vacation or two, is no big deal. And so they take out a loan in the foreign currency, and then when their local currency starts to go down, they get squeezed out. Because of the sanctions, this is not happening with Russia vis-a-vis Europe. They're not able to go to Europe. They're not able to spend money, the rubles that they have, in Europe. And so it's played to the Russian central bank and ministries of economy's advantage, the sanctions, okay? And so, yeah, I would agree with you that a strong ruble is good. The Russian authorities aren't going to have a problem with it because of the reasons I mentioned. And I think that what would be smart is, and what they are probably thinking, is that let's keep a strong ruble throughout the rest of this war. And once the war is clearly over, then we start making loud and clear signals that we're going to start to slowly, let the juice out of the ruble and let it soften a little bit. But for the time being, I think that it's the smart move for them to keep it, at this range of between 50 and 60 rubles to the dollar. Yes. Yes.
I mean, the Russian economic debates, which are very free and very open. I mean, it's interesting to see, the economics ministry publicly debating the central bank. Doesn't happen in the West very much. You see those sort of things. But, I mean, they are actually conducted at a very intelligent and sophisticated level, far more so than you see in the West. And of course, again, Westerners, Western governments, and Western commentators are completely oblivious to this sort of thing. One of the fundamental mistakes they made is that they didn't understand what a sophisticated society they're pitting themselves against. They still think of Russia as a backward place. Well, it may not be as rich, or it may not have been as rich as some Western countries were. But intellectually, it's been high-powered for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I think, that's for a long conversation, but I think it's basically the issue is the Russian people are just simply better educated than the Western people, on the average, of course. But they are. It's indisputable. And so the average Russian understands what's going on and has the sophistication to have a fairly intelligent and more or less accurate view as to what's happening economically, politically, in terms of foreign policy and militarily. And the Westerners, I don't think they have that sophistication, to tell you the truth. I think that they're just not educated enough.
Indeed. Now, somebody just asked us, are we heading towards a Weimar-type outcome?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't. Yes. I'm not going to make sweeping claims, but I think it's not impossible. And I think the country to watch now, because I think this is becoming, I think it's entering very dangerous territory, is Japan, which I know you know something about, Gonzalo, at least. But it seems to me that the money printing machine there is now operating at almost Weimar levels.
Yeah,
I mean, the level of money emission in Japan is rapidly getting out of control, with no sign of the Japanese central bank, the Bank of Japan, seeming to know what to do or to put the brakes on. So if we're going to see a crack in the system, it could come in Japan. What do you think about this, Gonzalo?
I thank you so much for ascribing to me deep knowledge that I do not possess, unfortunately, because I don't know that much about Japan. I'm so sorry to say. But what I do know is the American economy, and what I would be very concerned about is something that's coming up that not many people are noticing: the 4th of July weekend. Do keep in mind, the 4th of July weekend is a time when Americans travel, both by plane and by automobile. They spend a lot of money on food. They spend a lot of money on entertainments. It's going to be very interesting to see gasoline prices during and after the 4th of July weekend. Food, will there be enough supply? Because it's going to be this weekend of the 4th of July that's coming up is something that I think people should be paying attention to. Insofar as Japan is concerned, what you outlined is, yes, it's accurate. And one would have to wonder if Japan is going to be the canary in the coal mine, but there are also specific issues going on in Japan that do not quite affect, there is no counterpart in the other countries in the EU or the United States. But it seems to me that the US, we should be paying attention to the US, because ultimately it's the dominant economy, even though it's not quite as big as it used to be, and it really isn't bigger than the rest of the economies of the Western Alliance. But it's the dominant player, and I think the 4th of July is something that we should really be worrying about. But my personal thinking is, yes, the dollar is going the way of Weimar. I think that it is inevitable at this point. Larry Summers recently gave a speech that he got a lot of criticism for, that the only way to solve the inflation problem was to have better than 5% unemployment. I beg to differ. During the stagflation era, the unemployment was a lot higher than 5%, and it didn't make a licking difference insofar as inflation at that time. So, and I understand what they're saying, that it's a demand-driven inflation, and that higher unemployment would help. I disagree, because the issue today is that most people, even employed, do not have enough money to cover their expenses. So I don't see this. I don't see this happening at all.
I entirely agree. I think the other big canary in the coal mine. Well, I mean, let's go through them all. Let's talk about Britain, which is where I live. Now, a couple of days ago, I sent a photo. I don't want to make it public because I don't have permission to, but from the people that I photographed. But I live in a very affluent part of North London, which is very affluent. And 50 seconds away from my house, literally 50 seconds away by foot, there was a food bank and a queue. And I sent the picture of it to Alex. And Alex, I think, was stunned to see these sites in affluent parts of London. And you're going to see more and more of that across Britain. I mean, if this is happening in London, which is, far and away the richest part of Britain, well, it must be happening to a much greater scale in other places. We talk about a cost of living crisis in Britain. Incomes are contracting faster than at any time since the modern records started to be taken in the 1950s. And today, as I am speaking to you, we have a rail strike. Railway workers are striking because they're not able to keep up with costs. Their cost of living is falling fast. We have other workers now, other key workers, also talking about striking. Believe it or not, and this is perhaps one of the strangest things, we have lawyers now threatening to go on strike because the legal aid system is breaking down. It doesn't cover expenses. This is we have this part of our welfare systems in Britain that, especially for criminal cases, I mean, because people who are facing a criminal charge under the Human Rights Act, they have to have legal representation. And anyway, that's long been the tradition in Britain. So if they can't afford their legal expenses, the state steps in and it pays through the legal aid fund. Well, that isn't enough to cover barristers' fees, legal fees, because and lawyers are protesting that isn't high enough. And I should say criminal lawyers, the kind of people who work on the coalface, who turn up in the lower courts. To my absolute knowledge, I mean, I know some of them. They don't actually earn much money. I mean, you're not talking about, the big fat cat corporate lawyers. I mean, I'm talking about the kind of people you will find if, get into trouble and you go to a police station and there's somebody there that you talk to. Those lawyers are finding it very difficult. So lawyers are in trouble. People at every level are in trouble. And there's talk about more strikes. There's talk about a summer of strikes. There's talk about a wage price spiral starting up. And, Gonzalo, you experienced that in your youth in Chile. You know what that's all about and how that can get out of control. And, of course, this is coming at a time when the public finances are in a terrible state, when the government has been spent a vast amount of money to bail out the banks in 2008, and that's never been clawed back. And of course, it spent even more amounts of money during the pandemic, during the lockdown period. And of course, with problems of tax collection, if there's a recession, with interest rates creeping up, but far too slowly. There's also pressure on the exchange rate. Sterling has been falling. We import our food. We import most of our goods. Falling exchange rate, falling faster than the dollar, falling faster than other currencies, means higher inflation here. We're in a very, very bad hole indeed. And nobody seems to have an answer. And I have to say, there's a real possibility that we could see a wage price spiral, higher inflation, government perhaps starting to turn on the printing press again, just to hold things together.
What answer are they looking for, Alexander? Because the leader of the UK, instead of sitting in the UK and solving the problem and looking for an answer and going to meet with his constituents, I believe in Yorkshire is where he was going to meet his constituents. Yeah. He gets on a plane to meet with Zelensky to offer him some stupid deal about training troops and to bring him a book about the Queen. And all of this is happening. Everything that Gonzalo and Alexander are talking about is happening in the beginning of summer. We haven't even hit the winter months yet.
Oh, yeah.
And Russia still, to this day, the only action they have really taken against the West is gas for rubles, which was really no big deal at all.
No, this is absolutely true. Can I just say, we did a program about Boris Johnson's trip to Kiev. I don't know whether it's up yet. I think it is actually, but I think, no, it's not up yet. But can I just say, we made this before the articles that I'm going to speak about, because Alex made the point to me over the course of that program that, in fact, this was Boris Johnson running away from problems in Britain.
Yes.
He didn't want to meet his activists, the activists of his party. He didn't want to confront these problems. So he ran away. He was hiding in Kiev from the problems in Britain. And that was a point that Alex made to me. It was a question. We don't rehearse our programs in advance. Alex said that. I'd already heard whispers to that effect in London. And now, of course, that's all come out in the media. So there's been articles now appearing in the British media saying exactly that same thing, that our Prime Minister is not up to dealing with the problems in Britain. He's running away to Kiev. Somebody said it's the most expensive therapy session in the world, going to Dr. Zelensky for treatment to escape your real problems, your real agonies and ordeals in Britain. So it went down. That trip that Johnson made to Kiev has gone down incredibly badly here. Johnson has been criticized by it from every side of the political spectrum, including by several of his MPs, his own Conservative MPs. It's the first time a British leader has done an act of support for Ukraine, which has come in for public criticism in that kind of a way. And all the newspapers came out criticizing it. And of course, the Conservative Party, members of the Conservative Party did as well. And I'm not going to even start on what the opposition is saying. We don't have a plan. We don't know what to do. The Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, this isn't the kind of thing he likes or understands. He's never been a good manager. Nobody's ever thought of Boris as any kind of manager. The trouble is, we look at our cabinet and none of them look like they're able to take over. None of them look like they have an idea of what to do either. And people look at the Labour opposition and they see a zero there as well. Nobody knows what to do. And of course, the first thing they need to do, and as I said, I mentioned this article by Gabby Hinscliffe in The Guardian. The first hint of that, the first thing they need to do is to be honest with the British people about the cost of this war of attrition in Ukraine. This article, I don't know whether you got this, where I was talking about Gonzalo, but there's been an article in The Guardian which says that we are suffering. People in Britain are now paying a major economic cost because of the consequences of this economic war of attrition with Russia. It's the first open statement about this, and it says that the government needs to be open with the British people about what that means. We're going to see more of that soon. And the first thing that has to happen, if we are going to get on top of this crisis, is we have to have a government that first speaks truthfully to the British people about this, and then decides that in Britain's interests, this economic war of attrition must end. No one in the political class is ready to do that. And frankly, I think it's going to be very difficult to get them to change. So we're in a very, very bad way here.
Yeah, I look, the people who are economically and historically more sophisticated realize the following. The crisis that we are experiencing now in the Western economies, we are heading into a inflationary recession that is going to turn into some sort of hyperinflationary depression. Now, the reason that this is happening is it's not a specific crisis of this moment. It's not even about Russia or commodities or anything. What's going on is that starting in roughly 1992, the Western economies decided, de facto decided, that they would never truly allow another recession to occur in the Western economies. The recession of 92 scared a lot of the political leadership of the West because they saw how George H.W. Bush, who should have won the election in 92, lost it because of the economy. It's the economy, stupid. And so the policy has been to never allow a recession to truly develop. Now, why is a recession actually necessary? Because what happens is that in every economy, you have malinvestments, the misallocation rather, of capital resources into businesses that are simply not profitable. And you have periodic recessions that bankrupt these companies that have misallocated capital and squeezes the more efficient businesses. And because of the squeeze, these more efficient businesses emerge stronger. just as it bankrupts the weaker businesses, the businesses that had mallocation of capital. But the central banks in the West, that is the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, they all embarked, excuse me, on a policy of money loosening whenever they saw that a recession was on the way. And this constant money loosening, this availability of capital, an enormous amount of capital, has created the misallocation of capital that we see. It is not logical for Apple computers or Tesla to be trillion-dollar companies. That should never have happened. That's absurd, especially in the case of Tesla. That's a pure speculation. And this is what happens when you do not allow recessions to clear out the deadwood. This is exactly, metaphorically speaking, it's exactly like when you have a forest and you never allow even a small fire to start in that forest. The underbrush, the dead, dried out underbrush grows and grows and grows. And so when there's a fire, it completely obliterates that forest. Well, that's what's happening now. There is the expression in economics of kicking the can down the road. That's what's happened in 2008, which was the perfect opportunity to have a severe recession to clear out all the deadwood, especially the deadwood in terms of the financial system, the banks, the bond markets. They didn't allow that to happen. They turned on the money spigot with quantitative easing, especially quantitative easing 2, which was the big one. Metaphorically speaking, even though subsequent iterations of quantitative easing were bigger yet in terms of actual money, but in terms of percentage, it was basically said, we are going to print money whenever we have a crisis. And that's what's happened. And see, when you keep on printing money whenever you have a crisis, creating capital out of thin air, eventually you create a house of cards. One little bump and the whole thing collapses. If the American, European, and British economies were back in, say, the year 2000, economically speaking, and there were these Russia sanctions, the Western economies wouldn't even have noticed it. It would have been less than a speed bump. But because of the fragility over the last 30 years of never allowing a true recession, this is the problem we're having. And this is why it is impossible to turn this crisis around. This is the one that we've been waiting for 30 years, and it's here. And to finish the point, this winter, in the fall, it's going to be bad. In the winter, people are going to be fighting for food. I'm not kidding.
This is, I have to say, I mean, what you also said, I mean, taking it further and talking about the effect of the money printing, this was the most interesting part of Putin's speech at SPIEF. Now, the Russians, of course, know all about money printing because this is exactly what was going on in the last years of the Soviet Union. They've experienced hyperinflation and they have all the behavior of the reformed alcoholic. They refuse to engage in money printing under any circumstances. I mean, they've never run away from recessions. And of course, they've always, as a result, they've always kept their debt burdens under control. But Putin spoke at great length about the damage that money printing has done to the economic fabric of the West and indeed of the world. And he's talked, and this is the most interesting part of it, how money printing has demoralized investment and reduced investment and lowered productivity in the West, even as it has sucked in goods from all over the world into the Western core. And he gave a most interesting example, which was, of course, about American agriculture. And of course, I remember the sort of heroic days of which are not long ago, in the 1960s and 1970s, when the US was the biggest producer of a major agricultural exporter. American wheat, American foodstuffs, and of course today America imports food, and the agricultural sector has been in severe difficulties in the United States, and productivity there has fallen. So this is what it has done, and of course we had the situation where, with all this money printing, debt has grown. there's been malinvestments, as Gonzalo has correctly said, or bad investments in many places. And of course, we're now going to get a recession on a completely different scale from anything we've had up to now. And of course, if you want a rough and very crude distinction between a recession and a depression, a recession is one when bad companies fail and the wood is cleared out. A depression is when good companies also fail, because they can't withstand the impossible rigors of what's going to come. So that's where we're heading. Now, I talked about Britain because that's the country where I live. Of course, the European Union is also in a terrible hole. We talked a bit about Germany earlier and about the way it's in severe crisis. Well, I mean, we're talking about, we look at the European Central Bank and this extraordinary event that took place about, was it a week or 10 days, or perhaps even a little bit longer, when, they're now seeing yields on, yield spreads starting to widen. So yields on Italian debt are now rising faster than German, and this is exposing the fault lines in the euro system. So what does Christine Lagarde do? Always remember that we're talking about, somebody actually said, as a rather clever question earlier about, that the Russians can't succeed because they're up against the masters of bullshit. Well, in terms of central banking, I think that if you're talking about bullshit, then
Christine Lagarde is pretty good at it.
Well, I mean, she's the undisputed champion. I mean, she leaves everybody else in the dust, if I can say so. So she decided to call this meeting, this urgent meeting, and there was going to be this urgent statement. And of course, we got this meeting, and the statement came out after a very brief meeting. And of course, it didn't really say anything.
Of course not.
You really unpacked it. What they basically were saying was, we're going to keep doing QE. We're not going to call it QE. We're going to package it and pretend that it's something else. But that's what we're going to do. So it was another case of what you said, Gonzalo, of kicking the can down the road, of pretending that the problem isn't there, of drawing the blinds down, and we see no evil, we see nothing bad. Of course, for the market, for a couple of days, they were impressed. They believed in Christine Lagarde's, great statements, but eventually, of course, reality comes home. I don't know what they're going to do in the Eurozone. I do know what they're going to do in the Eurozone.
Oh, they're going to print
more.
We're
going to see it. I know, but there's also going to be a massive push over the next few weeks and months when things really begin to get difficult to push for Euro bonds. We have to have debt mutualization. That this is the only way we can stabilize the financial system. That otherwise, and the Germans are going to be told, if you don't do that, the whole system will.
You're destroying Germany, Netherlands, Finland. Goodbye.
Exactly. All
the productive members.
All at the same time that you're piling on all these burdens
to the chat. I just want to give a quick explanation to people in chat who might not understand what Alexander was mentioning, and so this is very quick and very specific. Widening debt yields means that the yield on a specific bond means that its price is falling. That is because people do not believe that the bond will be repaid. Remember, a bond is an IOU. And so when a yield increases, that means that the price of the bond is decreasing, i.e. people are selling the bond because they don't trust the bond to be paid back at some future date. When yields widen between countries in the Eurozone, that means, you see, Italy releases bonds, emits bonds rather. Germany, the Netherlands, France, they all emit their own bonds. When yields widen, that means that some countries' bonds are considered less likely to be paid back than other countries. If the yields widen too much, this means that whatever countries' yields are rising precipitously, like Italy's, it's the belief that Italy will default on its bond. And so a euro-wide bond, a euro bond, would mean that all the countries are on the hook for a specific bond, okay? And then it becomes an issue of sort of like, you know, you have two barrels, one of slop and one of fine wine. If you put a single drop of fine wine into the barrel of slop, it's still slop. But if you drop a single droplet of slop into the fine wine, then the barrel of fine wine becomes slop. Well, that is the fear insofar as Eurobonds. Yeah. The authorities think that by emitting Eurobonds, they will strengthen the overall bond market. Whereas many people in the markets, myself included as an investor, would look at that and say, oh, then all of Eurobonds are slop and I want no part of it. See, that is on the one hand, you have the authorities believing one thing that is sort of like utopian, and the investors who are much more hard-headed because it's after all their money, they're saying, no, thank you. And this is going to be a disaster.
Absolutely. Can I just say I've been here before, because I can remember a time I was very heavily, I was, you know, working in this field. And I will say this, I'm not a person who has ever been any kind of investor, but I spoke out against it at the time. One of my few moments of actual glory in terms of, you know, the financing. I said I just didn't make any kind of sense, but I'm sure you can remember, Gonzalo, in the run-up to the 2008 crisis, all that bundling of mortgage debt with good mortgage debt. And everybody was saying this is going to be fine. We're going to be bundling up all that debt together. It's going to make it's going to make it easier for poor people to get loan financing because the good debt will support the bad. I remember saying to people, why do you think it will work that way and not the other? That the poor debt, the bad debt will weaken the good debt. Yeah. And of course, it turned out that it was, I was right. It was my only moment of glory in these kind of things. But essentially, that's exactly what they're doing with Eurobonds. They're bundling together bad debt with good debt, good German debt, because only it won't remain good for very long anyway. But I mean, good German debt with bad South European debt. And of course, they won't improve the Southern European debt. They will weaken, they will degrade, they will debase the good German debt and the good North European debt. Now, I have to say, I just want to comment on a comment by Toilet Source, who one of the most insightful of people. And he says that he thinks that 7% interest rates would still be too high in Russia. And that even if interest rates went lower, given the strength of commodity prices and the strength of Russia's current account, you still wouldn't see the ruble crash. No, I agree. I think that is exactly right. And I think we are going to see interest rates in Russia fall further. Now, can I just say, if it is indeed the case in Russia that we're going to see deflation this month, the economics ministry says the prices are going to fall overall in June, then, of course, keeping interest rates at the rate they are at the moment, which is 9.5%, means that the actual monetary policy is not only tight, incredibly tight, it's actually getting more tight still. So the market is going to start pushing inevitably for a loosening of monetary policy. And that is inevitably going to happen. So I would not be surprised if we start to see inflation continuing to fall, the ruble remaining strong, interest rates in Russia coming down, exactly as Toilet Source says. We're going to see more spending by the government because it's got, as Gonzalo also said, it's up to its ears in money. We can very well see economic growth resuming in Russia much quicker than anybody anticipates.
Well, there's something else I want to mention about the Russian economy and the Russian situation generally contrasted with the Western situation, which is the Russian people are very aware that this war is existential. They are under no illusions. They realize that Putin has been right for all these years, that this is a war of the US/NATO EU against Russia. And so, as you see, an economy is important insofar as the people and the political perception is concerned. The Russian people are aware that this war, special military operation, call it what you will, is existential. And so any economic hardship that they endure at this time is going to be considered simply, we'll have to deal with it. It is not going to create the political firestorm. Regardless of its inflationary, deflationary, this, that, it doesn't matter. Because for the Russians, the Russian people, their priority is the conflict in Ukraine, because they understand now very fully, especially after the violent divorce of Europe from Russia, what is really going on. They understand the importance of this fight. And so the economic situation, the employment situation, all of this is on the back burner insofar as the top 2 quintiles of the Russian population, the top 2 quintiles in terms of income and education, who are in every society, they've always been the class that actually matters, right? In Europe, in Great Britain, in the United States, the war is almost an entertainment. It's not that big of a deal. The economy is a big deal. And the fact that the West is in the process of a slow motion car crash insofar as its economy, and a car crash where the vehicle is going at 300 miles an hour right into a brick wall, that is going to cause all kinds of political instability. I mean, I think that people say that the 2020 riots in the United States were a big deal. You wait, because if you have people who simply do not have the money for food in the West, people overthrow governments and chop off people's heads when they don't have enough for food. This isn't, me saying this. Look at any history book. Every empire collapses when it can't feed its people. And so that's the big difference between Russia and the West.
Absolutely.
The Russians can afford to have a crappy economy. Right now, it's like, ooh, look, our economy is great. Lucky us. But they don't care about it because it's secondary to that primary issue of the war against NATO US. Whereas the West, for the people in the West, the economy is the issue. And so that's the big difference.
I think this is absolutely true. I mean, I have to make a further point, and in addition to this, which is, of course, that one must always remember that for Russians, the part of Ukraine that they're not now fighting in is not a foreign country.
No,
I mean, this is a difficult thing. This is something Westerners simply don't get at all. But for Russians, a place like Kharkiv, a place like Donetsk, a place like Odessa is a city of their own country. Now, it may have been politically, it may have been politically divided from them, but it's they feel themselves to be fighting on their own soil in defense of their own people. And that, believe me, does change the dimension of this in radical ways for Russians. Now, on top of all of that, when the war started, Putin made his speech. I will say straight away, I mean, I didn't think it was one of his best. I thought he was very, very tired when he made it. And it was not one of his most structured and well put together. But I still thought it got its points across very well. The point he was saying is that Ukraine is if Ukraine slips under NATO control, then that is going to be existentially dangerous for us because NATO, the West, is hostile to us. And what has happened is that the West went out of its way to prove him true. They embarked upon this extraordinary economic war. They imposed all of these sanctions. They supported militarily Ukraine. And of course, Russians are going around and saying to themselves, well, Putin is right. They're not just coming after him. They're coming after all of us. And I'm going to say what I think for many Russians. I know, Gonzalo might not agree with me on this, but I think one thing that the European Union did, which crystallized all of this in the most stark way, was when Ursula von der Leyen imposed that ban on on air flights from Russia to anywhere in the EU.
Oh, I agree.
That has absolutely nothing to do with the military operation.
Oh, I completely agree.
Made absolutely clear to Russians is these people dislike us. They're against us. They hate us. This is a war against us. And that consolidated support behind Putin. I mean, it was the most cack-handedly stupid thing that they could have done in those terms. I mean, they've done other things which are even more stupid. But in terms of winning over Russian public opinion, it was an utterly crazy thing to do. Now, Toilet Saucers fired off another question, and which is again about the Russian economy, which he said whether Russia should adopt full-fledged protectionism. I mean, I read it quickly, and I might not have got it exactly right.
Doesn't need to. It doesn't need to.
It doesn't
already
need
has
to.
it.
Gonzalo, you took the very words out of me, because the West has done it for them. I mean, people talk about Russia having capital controls. What capital controls do they need? The capital controls have already been imposed on Russia by the West. The West isn't exporting its goods there. Whilst the sanctions remain in place, they don't need these things. Now, if you're talking about the long term, I think that Russia is already, I think, going to edge out of the World Trade Organization. They made it very clear they're not going to go for a full autarky. They're not going to try and produce everything themselves, but they're going to make absolutely sure that any future economic partners are people who they can rely on to keep trade links open in a sensible and rational way. So it won't be exact protectionism, but it'll be something very like that going forward. It'll be very like what the US used to do when it had the Hamiltonian, Lincolnian, American system, which was what underpinned American economic growth all the way up to the 1950s.
Well, yeah, I mean, Putin for decades at this point really has been trying to wean Russia off of Europe.
Yeah.
And the Europeans did his job for him. You know, the Europeans, because of the sanctions and because of the persecution of oligarchs in Europe, the sequestering of oligarchs' assets in Europe and the United States, you know, they did Putin's job for him, because he's always trying to get the yoke of the oligarchs off his back and off of Russia generally, because he's not stupid. He understands that the oligarchs, they are a cancer, and he slowly and methodically over the decades, he's tried to reduce their power, which he has to some extent been very successful. But what the Europeans have been doing has played right into his ambitions. I mean, you know, frankly, Vladimir Putin should write a thank you note to Ursula von der Leyen, because she's been doing his job for him. And he is reaping the political benefits without any of the political costs. The Europeans are taking all of those costs from insofar as what the Russian people believe is responsible for this situation. And so, the capital controls exist de facto, and they should thank the European Union for them.
Now we had another. I mean, we're having a bombard of good questions all of a sudden.
Well, let's Alexander, because
you got to run out of time.
But let's go through the questions, guys, because we do have a lot of good questions, and I don't want to leave the questions hanging, and they're related to everything that we're talking about. So let's just run through all the questions, and we'll wrap it up. Is that all right?
Sure.
Yes, it is. I mean, I also now
there's a ton of good questions. We've answered quite a lot. We've answered quite a lot of questions. Let's just run through them. And there are some questions directed at you as well, Gonzalo, to answer. So let's just go through them. From Tabernacle.
I've always been this devastatingly handsome. It's just I was born lucky. Yeah.
Well, Tabernacle says shutting down Shanghai demonstrated their ability to maintain order and control under siege. A blockade won't deglobalize the world. It will de-dollarize it. Thank you for that, Tabernacle.
Well, can I just say, I have heard, I can't say whether this is true or not, but that one of the purposes of the lockdowns is to provide a dress rehearsal for the Chinese government to prepare for that kind of control in the event that there is when the big crisis with the United States comes. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I have heard people say that.
It seems I've also heard rumors to that effect, but I have not heard anything that I would say is rock solid intelligence in
well,
that
the Chinese government is not going to confirm. It seems a reasonable guess. Yeah.
Jam says, isn't natural gas the cleanest fossil energy source?
Yes, is the answer straightforwardly. Absolutely. So that's why you go for coal instead. Yeah. But you can always get water mills are still an option.
Let's see, Gonzalo, you answered the question about network, 1976. Osman the Human, thank you for that super chat. Commando Crossfire, we answered the question about Lithuania. Remember the fate of the Finns that besieged Leningrad. Never again. I cannot escape the feeling that something huge and destructive was hanging over all of us, is the quote. Yeah, Commando Crossfire has given us. Manfred, thank you for that super chat. Roman, thank you for that super chat. Ursula Vander Crazy says, Alex, say my name, dear. I love it. Ursula Vander Crazy. Ursula Vander Crazy.
Ursula Vander Crazy.
Gagent says, thank you for your amazing work, guys. Much love. Steven says, Russia can't win. It's playing against the biggest BS artist in the world. Simple fact, you answered that question, Alexander, very well. Sabrina Liston says, thank you for your hard work, illumination, and continuing good humor. It really helps. Thank you for that. Liana LK says, any predictions on how Russia may respond to the bombing of the oil rig in Crimea and murder of Russian civilians there? I think you guys both answered that question.
No, they'll keep their cool.
They'll keep their cool. Tim, thank you for that super sticker. Robotics says, interview at Liu Sivaya, English, Russian, and Spanish. Thank you very much. We will look Liu up. Truth Seeker says, do you think it would be safe to fly in Europe and Asia with all those javelins and stingers on the black market? That's an interesting question.
Very good question. Yeah. Well, I think we have to fly. I mean, that's the world economy. That's the world today. If things happen, which let's hope not, but if they do, well, we'll know who was responsible, because one can't say that people weren't warned.
Yeah, well, the thing is, these missiles, of course, it's not easy to ship them from place to place. And so I think that what we're going to see is more of these Stinger Javelin missiles fired at commercial aircraft over potential danger zones like Syria, for instance. But like someplace like South America or Africa, for instance, no, I don't think anybody has to worry about anything unless it's around a war zone like in Africa, perhaps. But I don't think it's anything. But I think that we will see commercial aircraft shot down because of it, and it will send people into a panic. And therefore, we will see the airlines suffer even more. I mean, they've suffered brutally so far, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon.
Rose GNL, thank you for that super chat. Steven says, the law does not matter. This is a naked power game.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where we've been brought to. I mean, we were trying to move forward away from that, and we've slipped back into that. So thank you, Joe Biden, Ursula, all of you, because that's the world you've given us.
Yep. Exactly right.
Balky says the Ministry of Defense Russia, quote, M77 155 howitzers delivered by the USA and European countries to Ukraine have become a good target for Russian destruction means. That is a quote.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that, and that's absolutely true. And by the way, Gonzalo, what you said about the 777s being utterly fragile, I absolutely agree. I've been reading more and more people say this, and I will say this also. I read an article by Scott Ritter before they were delivered, in which he warned that this was exactly what would happen, that these are fragile, maintenance-heavy guns, completely unsuitable for war in Ukraine.
FMAX says, how much would you say the war is about imposing EU and Western values on Russia?
All of it.
Oh, it's all about it. Everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what all of this is all.
That's what all of it's about. Yeah. George D says apparently Turkey is considering to leave NATO.
I don't know about that. Alexander, please.
I don't think so. I think that Erdogan is going to remain in NATO, because why wouldn't he? I mean, from his point of view, what does he lose by keeping Turkey in NATO? He can actually, he's got something more to bargain with, because you want to bring Finland and Sweden into NATO. Well, you have to come to Mr. Erdogan and give him whatever he's asking for, because otherwise. So why would he throw that away? I don't see him doing it, to be honest.
No. It's just exactly right. Nothing more to add to that.
Yeah. Zionic, thank you for that super sticker. Sanjeva says, hey, the Duran, keep up the good work, guys. Thanks for everything you are doing. Thank you, Sanjeva, for that. Raphael says, the final plan is for an army like we have never seen before with China, Russia, Iran, and Afghanistan will enter Washington, D.C. on foot. Okay, in less than 5 years, if the U.S. do not come to their senses. Thank you for that super chat, Raphael. MDU Sibanda, thank you for that super sticker. Steven says, always listen to your heart. Allahu Akbar. Thank you, Steven, for that. Rose GNL says, Gonzalo and Alex, if Russians take Odessa, then we will lose a widely considered source of pretty girls. Gonzalo, which other place is next?
What do you mean in terms of the Russians?
Pretty girls. Lot of
pretty girls
everywhere.
You would know better than me, man. So I'll leave that in your question.
Pretty girls are everywhere.
I mean, all I will say is this: having travelled in this part of the world, I mean, there's no shortage of those, and they're certainly not confined to any city. But
Reza says the Duran rocks. Appreciate all your hard work, Alex Alexander. Amazing. Thank you very much, Reza. Calvary, thank you for that super sticker. StarX, thank you for that super sticker. Robotics, thank you for that super chat. Steven says Russia will take Odessa 100%.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that the only doubt at this point, as far as I'm concerned, as to the regions that Russia will take, look at a map right now, and I'll just enumerate them. It'll clearly be all of Kharkov, all of Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, Kherson, and Odessa, potentially Dnipropetrovsk, and that probably, 80% likely, and Poltava, maybe not. That's up in the air. But all the others I've mentioned before, which are all in the south and the east of Ukraine, I personally believe that is currently the objective insofar as the Russians are concerned. I do not think it was their objective on February 24th, but the way things are playing out, now it has become so.
Yes. I will quickly also add that I think Russia's international partners have come round to accepting that. I think if Russia had said at the outset, we're going to take Odessa, then, people in Delhi and Beijing would not have been pleased. Now they can see the logic of it.
Trevor Lynn says, great chat, guys. Trevor Lynn. Simon RB says, get yourself a gallon of 95 on me. Good day from Australia. Thank you very much, Simon, for that. Liana says, thank you for all the daily dose of sanity. And Alex, loving all the cultural walks in Greece and Cyprus. Look forward to our August trip to Greece. Hope we get to buy you a glass or 10, Liana. Absolutely, Liana. Thank you very much. Look forward to having you.
Oh yeah, Alexander, Alex, rather. I want to tell you that I love watching your videos, and I say, I want to go there. What am I doing here? Why am I here in the middle of the missiles and stuff? I should be over there on the beach, man, like you. Yeah, damn, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful.
Thank you. Let's see, Alex, thank you for that awesome super chat. Alex Glanz. Daniela, thank you for that super sticker. Summer of 1970, thank you for that super sticker. Andre Alexei, thank you for that super sticker. Fiona says, keep up the good work. Power Trio, thank you for that, Fiona.
Thank you.
Jaimu Feru says, do you think the American Bidenopolis Obama did all this sanctions in order to Russia in order to destroy the EU economy? Cheers.
Yeah, I think we touched on it. I don't think that was why they did it. That might have been part of some people's ideas. But I think that it was very much targeted at achieving regime change in Russia. And it's failed catastrophically.
I want to say something parenthetically, but it always bothers me when people ascribe all kinds of 4D motivations to the Biden administration, the people in Washington, the people in Brussels. These people are operating on a second-to-second basis. They are acting emotionally, irrationally most of the time. They are trying to save their positions like drowning people do, who have no plan other than to survive for the next few seconds. So to ascribe to them some deep-seated motivation, some 4D chess move that like way down the line will go their way, no, that is a huge mistake because it ascribes to them an intelligence that they simply do not have. If you look at them and realize that they are operating second to second, they are actually much more predictable that way. and you can understand what is going on and what will likely happen in the next 5 seconds. But if you try to impose on them like a big, conspiracy or something like that, you're wasting your time, and you're not going to, more importantly, you're not going to be able to figure out what they're going to do in the next, week, because that's how these people operate. I just have to emphasize that. Insofar as breaking the EU economy, I think that the Biden administration did want to kill Nord Stream 2. That was a priority, but it was more to keep Germany apart from Russia, but it was not in an effort to destroy Germany's manufacturing base or some 4D move like that. That has been the net result, but it was not the intention. Their intention was much more specific and localized and short-term.
Got away from them. Maria, thank you for that super sticker. Melissa, thank you for that super sticker. Rose, thank you for that super chat. Eduardo, thank you for that super chat. Balke says, Turkey and NATO did not receive any advantages, but the exit from the bloc promises it a lot of advantages. That's according to the publication Cumhuriyet.
Could be.
Okay. Interesting. E-Ray Reichley says, I love you guys. I watch every show you make. Could you please talk about Russia stopping nuclear fuel cells to the west for nuclear power plants? The sale was started many years ago from the megatons to megawatts program.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't done it yet, but it's something that if they do, well, it will have very big consequences, because apparently Russia accounts for something like 40% of the supplies here. So it's another area where you just can't cut the Russians out. And it comes back to what Alex was saying, that the Russians haven't really done anything so far in terms of counter-sanctions. If they start going down that road, well, God help us.
They will.
True.
They will.
Yeah. Let's see. Tech Wong, thank you for that super chat. Duminda says, excellent as always. Thank you, guys. Liana says, EU ESG regulations block institutional investors from defense and fossil fuel stocks, which are now, of course, doing better, while the rest of the market is in free fall. Germany and Italy are firing up the coal plants.
This is actually an extremely good point, because, again, you see how policy decisions and ideology is deforming markets, because logically funds ought to be going in one direction, but they're specifically prevented from going there. And of course, I'm not a market fundamentalist or anything of that kind, but ultimately this does create inefficiencies, and this is just another example. It means that you need more fossil fuels, but you're not going to get them because institutional investments are not going to go into the companies that produce those fossil fuels. And that creates inefficiencies.
Yeah. Stephen says, Alexander, that this was the plan all along. Thank you very much, Stephen, for that. Belladonna, thank you for that super sticker. Matthew says, in your opinion, gents, when do you think Russia can claim victory in the Donbass offensive?
I think they will claim that the phase 2, if you like, the victory in Donbass will be when Donbass is cleared. In other words, when the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics encompass all the territories of the former Donetsk and Lugansk regions. That will be when the Battle of Donbass will have ended and when Russia has won. But it will not be the end of the war, because I think it's now become absolutely clear as crystal that the war is going to extend beyond Donbass. I think that at the beginning, like Gonzalo said, they might have been prepared to stop at Donbass, but with all that's happened, they will move beyond it.
Oh yeah, it's very clear. That's a really good question. I mean, when do you declare victory in a war? Insofar as the Battle of the Donbass is concerned, I think what will happen is that when you have like a clear break in the Ukraine armed forces, I can't identify that clear break. It'll be obvious once it happens, but beforehand, it's kind of like impossible to predict. But there will be that moment where it's obvious that the Ukraine armed forces don't have any more in them to continue in the Donbass. And it'll be when all of a sudden you're going to hear Russian tanks or Russian troops on the move covering, 10, 20, 30 kilometers per day as they go on to their next objective. That's when you know it's over. That's when you know that the Donbass has been won. And the end of this war is when the Russian flag is flying over Kharkov and Odessa. That's when you know that it's over.
Russell Hall, thank you for that super chat. Kurt Frab says the U.S. often talk about their allies. They have no allies. They have servants who are disposed of when not complying or needed anymore.
Yep.
Thank you for that, Kurt. Reza says, gentlemen, what are your thoughts on Lavrov visiting Tehran this week? Actually, you answered that in pretty good detail, Alexander. Jamie Lee says, Lira, how is Kharkov? I lived in Saltivka for almost 12 years. We left in 2019.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's. I was actually, looking at a major avenue here. It's all of a sudden kind of like very quiet, actually, enough that I'm sort of like perking up and wondering what's going on exactly. The city life itself, it's very interesting. The city life itself, it was quiet as a grave during most of March and April, and into May it started perking up. And to tell you the truth, now in June, there's movement. Stores are open. Big stores are open. Foxtrot is open. For instance, Foxtrot is a big electronics store. The big supermarkets are open. I've been noticing that some, fruits, for instance, vegetables, meats, fish, they are replenished regularly. Whereas potato chips, I'm addicted in a very unholy way to potato chips. They're kind of gone, actually. They're not being replenished or restocked, which is disappointing, but good for my weight. But no, it's kind of interesting. It's sort of like coming back alive, and yet at the same time, quiet sometimes. And also, do keep in mind over the last couple of days, especially last night, there were two big strikes very close by. And I mean, yeah. And so it apparently they hit a command structure with two Kalibra missiles. And so, there is a sense that the war is coming to Kharkov. There are a lot of rumors that there is an amassing of Russian troops to the north of Kharkov, behind the lines, roughly 30, 40 kilometers from here. There's also an indication that the Russians to the southeast are preparing for a big offensive towards Chuguyev, which is as I understand it, a military town with a military installation, a significant military installation. And so we're going to see what happens next. But I think that Kharkov is next on the menu, to tell you the truth.
Russell Hall says, a fool trusts in the foolishness of their enemy. Excellent quote, Russell. Thank you for that. Belladonna says, do you think NATO should be disbanded? Yes. Alfaria says, why is deflation bad?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah. You see, the deflation is very bad because, you see, when prices are falling, profit margins get squeezed out. And so a company, when it's selling its goods or services and they're not getting the profits necessary to continue, they start cutting back and they fire people. And of course, they lay people off because they no longer need that many workers for whatever product they're producing. And as that happens, the workers who are no longer working are no longer spending money in the economy. And so people who sell products start lowering the prices even more. And this, of course, creates a downward trajectory, a self-reinforcing feedback. Lower prices means less production. Less production means more unemployed workers. More unemployed workers means lower prices, and you go down the tubes. So deflation is not a good thing. It's good if you're saving money. It's good if you're a retiree on a fixed income or a pension of some sort. But it's very, very bad for the economy. You don't want it. The sweet spot for a developing economy, you want an inflation between 7 and 15% annually for a developing economy. For an established economy, a mature economy, you want something that's closer to, between 3 and 7%. Deflation is bad, bad, bad for good reasons.
Zukzuxi says, afternoon, gentlemen, mods, and chat. Thank you for that, Zukzuxi. Gordon, thank you for that super sticker. Balke says, NATO is cooked. Turkey is done. Nina says, invite Dr. Hudson again. I requested him to be on your podcast. He said he'd be happy to. I'd love it. I'd love it to keep up. Dudes, you rock.
Can you provide us with his details? Because I would love to have him on.
That would be fantastic to have him on. Absolutely. Provide us with those details. Yes. If you have those. Batless X says, for Gonzalo, how are FACTA bank rules affecting him? And how would Russia's plan to have bondholders open Gazprom bank accounts actually work for Americans? Wouldn't the U.S. find a way to stop this plan?
FATCA, are you talking about the foreign agency? The foreign
for banks. No, they track your bank accounts. How the U.S. Is pipelined into all of the international banks, and they basically track all of your spending.
No, I think that the Russian banks are just blowing it off. They don't have to, because they're prohibited from doing business with American banks or European banks because they've been cut out of SWIFT. So they're like, yeah, screw that. They don't have to pay attention to that. So I think a lot of Americans will start realizing that opening a bank in Russia or Russia-adjacent financial firms would be a good idea, precisely to avoid taxes. Yeah, I mean, because the Russians aren't going to report to the IRS like every other bank in the West. So, yeah, I think that's in the cards.
Yeah. Artan M74 says, in Russia, everybody is talking about global mobilization coming in July. How do you think things could unfold if this is true?
I don't think military globalization?
Global mobilization, yeah, yes, military.
Global mobilization.
I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen. No, I don't think so either. I think, on the contrary, I think if we see a Russian breakthrough in July, which is not impossible, we'd actually paradoxically start to see, after brief period of hysteria, we could actually start to see a relaxation of tensions. The big question is what might happen in the Pacific, in Taiwan, but I don't expect anything there before the autumn.
All right. Command Unit says stronger ruble helped Russia to establish alternative supply chains and lower inflation of prices, so the benefits are real for the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. We've touched on this.
We've touched upon that. T-Bone says, has anyone seen Victoria Nuland lately?
Yeah, she's running the Institute of War with the other members of the Kagan family. I hadn't appreciated the extent to which this ludicrous, preposterous institute that provides all these completely misleading and propagandistic bulletins about the war is actually run by them.
Pure propaganda.
No, yeah. I mean, I could have told you about this a couple of months ago. Yeah, I've been following that whole family.
I didn't. Well,
they're nefarious. Nefarious.
Yeah.
That is the word for them.
Yeah, and it's the whole family. The key word is the whole family.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing. The thing that struck me, the last couple of days, these. Bastards, really. They are circulating a photograph of some young man weeping over the corpse of his girlfriend who was killed in the shelling in Donetsk, and they are saying that it was the Russians who did it. That is low. That is just. I mean, see, it's one thing to ignore something like that when your side is committing human rights atrocities.
Yeah.
But to ascribe to the other guy, and that pretty much sums up the whole mentality of these people. They ascribe to the other what they themselves have in their hearts or what they themselves have done. When they talk about how Russia might use nuclear weapons, they are pushing nuclear weapons for the American side. Whatever they say that they suspect Russia is going to do or China is going to do, you can bet good money that it's what they are pushing, what they are thinking, what they are trying to make the Biden administration do. Because that's the sort of people that they are. They project onto others what is in their heart, what is in their minds, what they intend to do, what they are trying to do. As far as I'm concerned, they're evil. The whole lot of them.
Let's go for another 10 minutes, guys.
Sure.
Is that all right?
I can't. I have to go now, I'm afraid.
Okay. So we'll go for 10 minutes, Gonzalo, and
sure.
We don't have many more questions left, and we'll run through these and we'll wrap up the show because I also have to go. Jeremiah says, "Awesome show. Thanks for all you do." for all you do, guys. Thank you very much, Jeremiah, for that. Red Pill Scholar says, thank you for all you do, gentlemen. God bless you. Thank you for that. Hugh Evans, thank you for that super chat. Divided Surgeon says, we talked about traveling possibilities before, including Greece and Russia. Would either of you recommend traveling to Belarus from North America or not?
I'm sure it's lovely. I've never been there myself.
Yeah, I hear it's amazing, Belarus, but I don't know how the visas work for Americans right now, so I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's happening. Yeah, for American.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah. Francis says, totally true. Nuclear power is ideal for Germany, and they just abandoned it. Spot on commentary. Thank you for that, Francis. Eremia says, Russia has the highest abortion rate in the world. Are they returning to God, family, and nation, or is this a thin veneer with no substance?
I think that they will probably. I think you'll see a baby boom in Russia. If this plays out the way it looks like it's playing out, and the Russians wind up on top of this cake, yeah, I think that you might have a baby boom.
All right. I agree. I agree with that. Julia, thank you for that super sticker. Sparky, Germans tend to believe and obey authority. Thank you for that super chat. Sparky, Balke says, prediction, Stiller will play Zelensky in the movie adaptation.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, boy. I can see that, actually. Matless
and he'll have that look, blue steel.
Yeah. Yeah, blue steel, exactly, yeah. There's something about Mary.
Yeah, catching his zipper where you shouldn't. Yeah.
Oh, boy. Matless X says, how would a strong ruble attract more imports into Russia if there are largely no imports allowed to come in because of all of the sanctions? We talked about that, actually, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's from the East and South Asia. Yeah.
Exactly. Devin says, German psychological awakening will be this fall. Interesting.
And when it'll be too late. Yeah.
Yeah. Red Pill Scholar says, is the West heading into Weimar territory? We answered that. Commander Crossfire says, Kherson expects to join Russia by the year's end, according to TASS.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's in the cards.
Yep. Robert McIntosh says, keep up the good work, gents. PTE Geopolitics World Gone Crazy. Great channel. Says, great work, guys. Let's do a collab. Absolutely. PT Geopolitics, send me an email, and we'll put that together. Budweiser, thank you for that super sticker. Mortem says, fair New World Order or none at all. Thank you for that. Mortem Rex. Command Unit says, Italy gets a lot of its gas from the south and Turk streams, but their debt to GDP is at Greek levels. So I understand why they want Ukraine to surrender. Italy's having problems. Yeah. Colbury says, there was a cost of living march in London on Saturday. It was to protest high prices and low wages, etc. I think we're going to see a lot of marches.
Oh, yeah.
Gonzalo.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Yeah. Let's see. ELLK says EU USG regulations block institutional investors from defense. No, we answered that. We answered. Liana LK says, if two neighbors are fighting in the morning, it means the Englishmen spent the night with one of them. That's a quote. This quote is never more relevant than today.
I heard that quote earlier today, actually. Somebody tweeted it or something. Yeah.
Evans, thank you for that super sticker. Jungle Jin says, how is hot water turned off to entire towns in the EU or in some of its member countries? In Australia, water is heated in and by each household.
Well, it's different for each country.
Yeah, it's different for each country. Most of Russia, Eastern Europe, the water is heated
centrally and distributed.
Yeah. A summer of 1970, wishing everyone a wonderful summer solstice. I tell you, gambling never agreed with me. Last week, I went to the track and they shot my horse with the opening gun. Rodney Dangerfield.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't realized. Yeah, it is the summer solstice. Yeah.
Yes. M62259 says, what do you each expect a realistic response to Kaliningrad blockade to look like, an embargo by Belarus? You guys said...
Yeah, I think that they're going to ignore it for the time being.
Yeah. V-Plan, thank you for that super sticker. Jungle Jin says, the very light sentences given to the coup rioters reveals something rotten in the state of Kazakhstan. Yet Tokayev stayed close to Putin through the SPIEF.
Well, I mean, I don't have any opinion about that. You?
He was the guest of Putin at SPIF. He was on that panel, so that was interesting. G Liddy 2020, thank you for that super sticker. John Mansfield says, great show. Red Pill Scholar says, does any honor exist in UK politics anymore?
Did it ever? That's the question.
Yeah, exactly. Mitsya says, have a coffee on me. Alex, thank you for that. RSSM says, what would a Great Depression 2.0 look like in America? We've changed so much in terms of technology society since the last one.
You'll see a lot of people commit suicide. I mean, we're talking serious now, yeah? I think a lot of people will commit suicide because they can't handle the kind of shock that, no money for food and really just bottom of the barrel all of a sudden. They go from, a decent job making good money to all of a sudden living in their car and having no money for food. You see, Americans have had it easy for decades now. And so the people now, the young people, they're soft. They don't have what it takes to really get through a rough patch. I mean, all of these kids were on anxiety medication because of somebody looking at them funny or not using the correct pronoun. They're weak. And weak people like that resort to drastic and foolish measures. I mean, I'm certainly not advocating for harming yourself, but I think that a lot of these young people will not be able to handle tough times because they're not used to it. You have to go through tough times to build up, your immune system, to build up, the emotional resilience. And so I think a lot of people will resort to self-harm. Yeah, that's what I think. Depressing as it is, but that's the truth.
Von Ronge says the Queen still hates the Russians for murdering her cousins, the Tsar and his family.
I think it's, yeah. But
yeah. Yuri Gabor says sanctioning Russian coal started from August. It's not a big deal. Thankfully, EU politicians are naughty enough to get quite enough lumps from Santa's elves to run the power grid. Have a nice winter, EU. Thank you for that. Wonton DW says, as the world economy shifts to Asia, Russia will be the major resource supplier. Whatever is left of Ukraine could become the connecting point for trade between Asia and Europe. Very true.
That's assuming that Asia wants to trade with Europe.
Asia wants to trade with Europe. Exactly. Nadia says, I'm so ashamed of my country, the former USA, waking up and realizing that a person's country is the biggest sadist narc bully in the world. Thank God, Jesus, that he is in control. Thank you for that super chat. Nadia, Rob Veller says, thanks for the hard work, guys. Thank you for that. And Armchair says, with Moldova ever becoming more hostile towards Russian speakers, do you think that this increases the odds that Russia will absorb Transnistria as well? Oh, yeah. Transnistria?
Yeah, they're going all the way to Transnistria.
They're going to go to Transnistria. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
No question.
Yeah. Toilet Sauce says, wouldn't it be beneficial for Russia to follow straightforward protectionism in the long term? We've answered that. Command Unit says, is Kazakhstan distancing itself from Russia now to avoid sanctions? Why has the Kazakh president at SPIEF? The situation in Kazakhstan seems weird to me.
They're trying to balance both sides for the time being, at least, which is perfectly rational for the Kazakhs to do.
Hugh Evans says,
but I think that the SPIF thing, it was to emphasize that the Kazakhstan is with Russia.
Exactly.
But
exactly, yeah.
They're trying to. Yeah, they don't want to antagonize Russia. They want to make it clear that they're on Russia's side, but at the same time, they want to keep the door open to Europe, which is reasonable.
Yeah. Hugh Evans says, is there a possibility of Russia getting drunk and overconfident on their power and success and blowing it?
No, not yet. Not yet. See, because this is too new. This hasn't quite happened yet. They're in the process of winning this conflict, but it hasn't happened yet. When it happens, and the Russian people and the Russian leadership have had some time to digest it, sure. But do keep in mind, it won't happen with the people who are currently in positions of leadership, because Putin will eventually step down or die in office, one or the other, because we all shuffle off this mortal coil. And the next leader, whomsoever he may be, is somebody who is in a position of leadership now in the Kremlin. And so they were aware of what a big risk it was to move forward with this operation in Ukraine. And so that leader, the next one after Putin, whomsoever he may happen to be, and perhaps even the one after that too, they will be very aware of how close they were, that they got lucky, that a lot of things came their way, that they prepared properly, but at the same time, there was an element of luck, because in all success, there's always an element of luck. And so they will be more humble about it. It's the leadership that is not in power yet, but that will be in positions of power in 30 years. Those are the people who are going to be arrogant and stupid. But the current people in power now, no, they understand how touch and go it has been, and how it's still touch and go. They still haven't won this situation, but they are getting there. You see what I'm saying? Alex, does this make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It's kind of that phrase, the grandparents start the business.
Yeah, the parents grow it.
The parents grow it, and the kids lose it. Yeah, it's kind of something along those lines. Yeah, gotcha.
It'll be a couple of decades before that becomes an issue to worry about. Yeah,
exactly. Lady Cosmica says, too many snowflakes in today's society.
Oh yeah, talking about my comment about of how the current crop is just weak.
Matthew Rains, thank you for that super sticker. Let's see. Summer of 1970 says, my Pomeranian has total control of my house. Thank you for that.
Okay. Is that something you should be bragging about? I don't know.
Sparky says, the West may become a primary supplier of mail order brides. By the way, good work, fellas. Thank you very much for that, Sparky. Ninia says, how possible is it that the coup came from Ukraine instead of China, and for that reason the West and the U.S. are adamant to destroy Russia to cover up?
No, I don't think that's the case, but certainly maybe other labs, sure.
Yeah, that I haven't heard.
No, I don't think it's a realistic possibility.
Neurosurgery Highland says, what about the perception of default of the Russian bond market that is coming, a default in the Russian bond market?
Well, I can speak with some knowledge about that situation. Nobody in the West, investor-wise, no investor seriously thinks that the Russians have anything to do with a technical default, okay? They all blame the Biden administration and the sanctions and the sequestership of assets in the West. So the investor community does not blame Russia. They know exactly this. These people are sophisticated. Okay, they know how this operates, and they know for a fact, because it's right there, that the Russians have the money to pay off, to make their payments on the bonds that they have issued. If they're not able to, it's not because they're not willing to. It's because they are prevented to by the Biden administration. So the lawsuits are all going to be against the Biden administration, the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve. Nobody's going to be suing Russia because Russia can say, we have the money. We can't pay you. We want to pay you. We're not being allowed to. Done.
Absolutely. Exactly. And the Russians know this.
Yeah. So for them, see, even if it technically affects their bond rating, sophisticated investors know that it's bullshit. Institutional investors, pension funds, insurance companies, because of their bylaws, they won't be able to buy these bonds. But regular investors are going to be lining up to buy Russian bonds. But of course they can't, because of sanctions rules. So nobody's blaming the Russians. On top of that, the Russians are flush with cash. The Russian government, let alone the Russia as a nation. So, it's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue, agree. Dexter Barry says, in previous broadcasts, have you suggested that in order to keep the Russian populace content, the government has spent on public works? So should it follow that after the smoke clears that Russia will spend on its newly acquired territory? Actually, Gonzalo, I read that they're going to spend a huge amount of money in the Donbass and to rebuild everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
it's going to be nice. They're going to make it nice.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like, if this was obvious to me, and I said so quite some months ago at this point. Once they have secure what they're doing in Kherson, okay, and what they're already doing in Mariupol, they are going to bring in money, all kinds of construction, and they're going to make it spick and span. They've already said that Azovstal is going to become like this beautiful park or this hotel and resort area, whatever it's going to be. They are going to go out of their way because it's not that the Russians are nice guys. It's that they will realize that if they make the Donbass and all of these newly acquired territories, if they make them as hospitable as possible, two things will happen. Number one, the locals will love it. Number two, it will attract more Russians to move there and therefore cement these newly acquired territories even more to the Russian Federation. So they have every incentive in the world to make these newly acquired areas spick and span. And on top of that, they've got the money to do it. So yeah, it's all good.
And if whatever state Ukraine is in, if there's a Ukraine, whatever state it's in, they're going to look at these areas and they're going to be like, what did
we want to go there? We want
to, we want to go. What did we get into this mess for? Yeah.
And they're going to blame the West for it. They're going to blame the West and Washington and Zelensky. Yeah. And Zelensky, with all the money that he's stolen, because he has, and they're going to blame him, and they're going to want that money back. And of course, the West is not going to let the rump Ukrainian state get that money back, and it's going to be ugly. But yeah.
Let's see. Nina says, "Do you think the West will survive an economic collapse, and where would that leave the U.S. in a year's time?"
No, they're not going to survive it. The EU will not survive a true economic collapse. I can tell you right now, like the Dutch, for instance, they are not going to be up to being in the same boat as, say, the Italians or the Spanish. They're going to say, no, we did everything right. Why should we go down the toilet with these other countries that were spendthrifts? And so, yeah, they're going to break apart. The more successful economies, I'm thinking specifically the Netherlands, they're not going to put up with it.
Brian says, I disagree with Gonzalo's view of deflation. It is good for consumers and producers as it allows their money to purchase more. No. If there is one loser with deflation, it is the government who's net debitors.
No, that's absolutely wrong. And by the way, it's been proven historically countless times. Whenever there is deflation, widespread endemic deflation, it's a catastrophe for the economy. You don't want it at any cost. And it's not a Keynesian thing. It's a non-ideological economic truism. And to say otherwise, you don't know what you're talking about. Sorry.
Kateri, thank you for that super chat. Jorgen, thank you for that super chat. Roman, thank you for that super sticker. Command unit says Baltic embargo. When?
Oh, that's remains to be seen.
Remains to be seen. Reza says thank you, mods. Paul says Paul, thank you for that super chat. Francisco, thank you for that awesome super chat. Vincius Arcaro says, suggestion, discuss a good country to live in.
I like Ukraine. I do.
Raul Pinto says, been an avid follower and supporter of the Duran since 2016, the best geopolitical analysis ever. Thank you, Raul, for that. Stephen Bateman says, I have full respect for you guys because only the truth will set us free. Thank you, Stephen, for that. Lamar Express Delivery, thank you for that super chat. Miss Anderson, thank you for that super sticker. Toilet Sauce says the European Commission shifted the blame for Kaliningrad on Lithuania after Lithuania shifted the blame on the Commission. The world's farcical game of hot potato. Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Unknown says, will Belarus annex northern Ukraine territories?
I don't think the Russians will let them. Yeah. You know, and I don't think that the Belarus has any historical claim to northern Ukraine. So I don't think so. But, you know, anything could happen.
So yeah. Harry C. Smith says, has Lithuania forgotten you have to go through Kaliningrad to get to Poland, Germany, and the rest of Europe? What is wrong with these people?
They're just dumb.
Good point. Good point. Moon Dragon says, what will Russia do about Kaliningrad? We've answered that.
Oh, yeah, right.
Toilet Sauce says, given that Lithuania behaves like the EU, NATO's annoying barking chihuahua, I suggest we henceforth refer to it as Lithuwawa.
Lithuwawa?
Lithuwawa. Yeah. Thank you for that, Toilet Sauce. Turkey leaves NATO, according to Sparky. They have leverage to run NATO. Well, yeah. Why should Turkey leave NATO? They have leverage to run NATO. Good point, Sparky. Jamila says, thank you so much, guys. I watch you all day. Thank you, Jamila. Lamar Express Delivery. Thank you for that. Stephen Bateman says, fact, Gonzalo. Spitting out facts, Gonzalo. Thank you for that, Jason Bateman. Just to know, thank you for that. Lindy says, Alexei is going to be late for something. Yes, I have already messaged that person and told them. Kate says, what can the Russians trade for Julian Assange? Putin would spike the football if he was able to get Assange to safety.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that Putin has any problem with Assange because, unlike Snowden, Assange is just a regular journalist. I mean, he really is a journalist. The whole Assange thing just makes me so depressed as to all of the fine principles of the Western democracies that have been betrayed by the current leadership. What's going on is simply that the Five Eyes intelligence apparatus of Canada, the US, Australia, the UK, and New Zealand, they hate Assange so much that they want to punish him at all costs. And this is what's happened. I also think that Assange didn't play his cards properly. I think that he should have allowed himself to be arrested and extradited to the United States back in 2012, when he had a lot more leverage. I think it was a serious mistake for him to have not done so. But spilt milk, water under the bridge.
Exactly. Eric DeButt, thank you for that super sticker. Zariel says, I don't think it can be declared a victory ever. As long as people die, it never will be. It can only be a military success, and that's it. Thank you, Zariel, for that. Raphael says, I am telling everybody, the war is not and never was about Ukraine. The war will end when the USA sign a legal document saying they are one of many. The war was not about Ukraine. That is true. The war was not about Ukraine. Flight Gamer says Zelensky is installing to better his negotiations with Russia. He's stalling to better his and his cabinet's exit negotiations with the EU. His better results for his family, cabinet, etc. Interesting post. Mitch just says, Gonzalo, keep posting, dude. You rock.
It's very kind of you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Raphael says, when we invaded Bosnia, we, the U.S., believed that the Russian army and all of their equipment were garbage. And now we know we were wrong. They are real. Thank you very much for that, Raphael.
Well, the revelation is American weapons are garbage.
Yeah. Yeah. The Russian weapons are real, and the revelation is the American weapons, correct?
Well, it's basically like the difference between a Ferrari and a Ford GTO. You know, the Ferrari is beautiful, but it breaks down every 5 seconds. The Ford GTO is not so pretty, but it doesn't break down. That's the key issue. In war, that matters most of all.
Yeah. QM says, thank you for your amazing analysis. What do you think of the U.S. plans for Australia, the AUKUS?
I think it was just stupid, and it's caused all kinds of problems. It alienated the French needlessly, and no benefits to Australia or to anybody. It was just dumb.
Yeah. John Ashley Smith says, I concur, you guys rock. Thank you, John Ashley Smith. Martin, thank you for that super sticker. Joe, thank you for that super chat. Jeremiah says, great show. Thanks for all you do. Let's see. I think we got everything. Thank you, Matthew, for that super sticker. Joe, thank you for that super chat. Cactus Ray, thank you for that super chat. And Gonzalo,
I think we're up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Yeah. And Ari, thank you for that super chat. Yeah. Thank you, Gonzalo, very, very much for sticking around.
Oh, my pleasure.
And answering all the viewers' questions. And you even got a couple you rock. So it was well worth it.
Yeah, it certainly was. Thank you so much for having me on, as always. It's just
do you have any final thoughts, Gonzalo, before we sign off? Any final thoughts, and we'll sign off. Thank you to everyone, by the way, on Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, Locals, and thank you very, very much to our moderators, Zariel, Lady Cosmic. I think I saw GEC in the House 812. I think I saw Alan Watson. I'm not sure, but I think I saw, and Gonzalo Lira, of course, one of our other moderators as well. Gonzalo, any final thoughts?
No, I just want to thank everybody in chat. I hope you enjoyed the show. And thanks to the moderators, Lady Cosmica and the others who are moderating. And Alex, and also to Alexander, thank you so much for having me on. It's always such a pleasure. It's always so flattering to be on your show. Yeah, it's so much fun.
We're happy to have you on. You got a final question for you, Alexander, which is for Alexander Gonzalo. Yeah. I'm used to that. Gonzalo from Jinsha says, Gonzalo, are you going to embrace your future Russian life?
I embrace any life that life throws my way. It's whatever comes my way, I try to enjoy it the most I can, because always remember, this is the only life that we get to live. And you should be embracing it and moving forward and enjoying it. And if you're having a miserable time, it's not the fault of your life. It's your fault. You should change your life if you are feeling miserable, and change it and go in a different direction. And whatever happens insofar as the current situation is concerned, I'm just going to try to roll with it and do the best I can with the circumstances that that have come my way. Yeah, that's basically my response to that.
A couple more. Salard says, hello from France. Alex, thanks for your work. And this is in reference, I guess, to your video. Gonzalo, can the Kaliningrad blockade be the start of World War III?
Very easily. And with that, I unfortunately have to run off.
Yeah, we are done. We are done, Gonzalo, as well. So thank you, everybody. And someone said, looking forward to Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, Tropic Thunder too. Yeah.
Take care, everyone. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.